Water Margin is a 14th century Chinese novel and one of the 4 great classical novels of Chinese literature. The story tells the tale of a group of 108 outlaws who form their own army but are then enlisted by the government as a lawful militia. This centuries-old text has been an influence on contemporary literature since it was first written. One series to be influenced by Water Margin is the RPG series known as Suikoden. Originally created by Yoshitaka Maruyama and developed and published by Konami, Suikoden was a long-running and popular role-playing game series. The mainline titles appeared on Sony's PlayStation and PlayStation 2, with some side games and remakes appearing on the PSP and Nintendo's GBA and DS. The series proved to be very popular, with Suikoden 2 in particular being beyond critically acclaimed and fetching incredible amounts of money on the secondary market. So let's go back in time to the PlayStation and PlayStation 2 days and talk about Suikoden. Just a quick aside, for this video I am mostly going to be focusing on the 5 mainline games. I'll touch on the side games, but only briefly as they aren't as important as the 5 main games. The first game in the Suikoden series, not ironically named Suikoden, was released for the PlayStation in 1995 in Japan, 1996 in North America, and 1997 in Europe. It was also released on the Saturn and Windows in 1998 in Japan. The game was one of the earliest RPGs released for the PS1, and it is rumored to have begun its existence as a Super Nintendo release. No solid evidence for this actually exists, but the lack of next-gen graphical techniques in the game have been cited as a possible indication of this being the case. But once again, there isn't any definitive proof to prove this. That being said, what Suikoden does portray is a beautiful and colorful 2D JRPG world. There isn't a lot of flash in the game, but the game is an incredible looking RPG released to a pre-Final Fantasy VII world. There are literally boatloads of big, beautiful sprites in this game. Being inspired by Water Margin, the game boasts 108 recruitable characters, and each of these characters is unique with their very own batch of sprites. Yeah, it's an absolutely incredibly huge cast. On top of this, you have a host of beautiful old school magic spells, vibrant towns, giant dungeons, and a huge world map. There are no massive Final Fantasy VII style camera pans, but this gorgeous old school game doesn't need them. Now, with such a huge cast of recruitable characters comes countless party combinations. On top of the massive 108 character roster, most of which are usable in battle, comes near limitless combos as you have massive 6 character battle parties. Want a magic heavy roster? 6 mages. Want something more balanced? 3 mages in the back row and 3 fighters in the front row. Want to augment the back row with some physical damage? Replace a mage with an archer, and so on and so forth. Battles will never become boring with this huge host of playable characters. The party members who join you that aren't fighters are used to augment the fortress that you will eventually build. A lot of these characters give you quality of life improvements, like the guy who joins you solely to build an elevator, or the guy who joins your party to let you play a gambling minigame that is highly exploitable. Battles have all the hallmarks of a standard RPG, including attacking, casting magic, running away, using items, and combination attacks. But one cool and unique action is that if you are a higher level than an enemy, you can let them run away for a price. That's right, sick of fighting sewer rats when you are fighting dragons? You can let low-level mobs flee battle and make some cash. Cool. On top of standard battles, you occasionally engage in one-on-one battles, usually between your leader and an enemy boss. And on top of those one-on-one battles, you also engage in huge and strategic war battles. Both of these battle types are similar to rock, paper, scissors, the only difference being in that the war battles, some of your recruited characters have special skills that can help turn the tide of battle in your favor. Yeah, seriously, this game is wild. You play as Tyr McDole, the son of a renowned general of the Scarlet Moon Empire. Being that your father is a great warrior, you decide to follow in his footsteps by joining the army yourself. And being a JRPG, of course you bring your ragtag group of friends with you. As the game progresses, you find yourself caught up in a war between empires, a desperate scramble for an ancient and powerful magic rune, and the horrendous reality of what it means for family bonds to be torn apart. The game is refreshingly short and can be completed in about 20 hours. I love a good long RPG, but a shorter game is always welcome to break the trend of long games. As long as the pacing's good, I'm looking at you, Suikoden 4. Suikoden was not created to be a legendary title, but it ended up being one. With accolades then and now, well over 20 years later, the title is remembered fondly and still pulls new fans in the modern day. The game commands a high price on the secondary market, but you can grab it for just a few bucks on PSN. Building on the success of the original Suikoden, Konami dropped Suikoden 2 for the PlayStation in 1998 in Japan, 1999 in North America, and 2000 in Europe. The game was also released for PC in 2003, but just in China. I guess it's fitting since China is the home of Water Margin. Little did Konami know that Suikoden 2 would go on to be one of the most critically acclaimed JRPGs to ever be released. The game's release was initially met indifferently despite decent scores from review outlets. Suikoden 2 eventually snowballed the entire series into one that would stand the test of time. Gameplay in Suikoden 2 did not evolve much from the first game, but it certainly did tighten things up. All three types of battles return, magic runes return, and recruiting 108 characters also returns. The graphics have only received a slight bump, but they still look great. They're still those crisp and colorful 2D sprites. All of the returning features are an example of, if it's not broken, don't fix it, and that is 100% fine. The game has been polished to an absolute sheen. Every single facet of Suikoden 2 is just that much better from the first game. The story of the game builds on that of the first game and is a direct sequel. If you import your save from the first game, you can actually recruit Tyr as part of your new army. You now play as Ryu, a young warrior in the Kingdom of Highland. Despite initially pledging fealty to Highland, you eventually become the leader of a rebellion against the Empire and its bloody prince, the insane Luca Blight. Blight's character has been hailed as one of the most well-written and cruelest characters in all of video games. He is an incredible antagonist and really makes you hate the Highland Empire. Also, being a direct sequel to the original game, several characters return, with a host of them even joining your party. Despite its small initial print run and lukewarm sales, Suikoden 2 has gone on to be an absolutely loved title from the days of gaming long past. The game, along with Suiko 1, was eventually re-released for the Sony PSP as a two-game collection. This re-release was unfortunately never released outside of Japan due to Sony being big dumbheads. The game is now available on PSN for a ridiculously cheap price, so if you really want to play this incredible title, you can do it without breaking your budget. By the time Suikoden 3 was released, Suikomania was at its highest point. All manner of merch was available, including music collections, manga, light novels, and much more. Most of these offshoots were only available in Japan, but were highly sought after by the worldwide fandom. With Suikoden 3 being released on the powerful and still fairly new PlayStation 2, all eyes were pointed towards what many fans were hoping was going to be a game on equal footing with Suikoden 2. Suikoden 3 is okay. I mean, it's pretty good. It's not awesome, but it's pretty good. Die-hard Suikoden fans look back on the game favorably, but those more casual fans view it as being a decent game that just couldn't live up to the immenseness that was Suikoden 2. Still, you'll find a solid RPG with lots of familiar mechanics to the previous games. Being on the PlayStation 2, the character models are now polygonal instead of being sprite-based. You still recruit 108 characters and you still take 6 into battle, but characters in the front row are paired with characters in the back row, giving the feeling that you have less control over your party than in the previous games. You get to choose from 3 different lead characters who all view the story in a different light. The music this time around is average at best, but that opening song, holy shit. The development team at Konami can't be blamed for wanting to try new ideas, but a lot of the new ideas are half-baked at best, and many of the revised systems from the previous games are likewise inferior. Despite these flaws, Suikoden 3 is still a decent title and is definitely worth playing if you are in love with the series. Suikoden 4 is widely recognized as the absolute nadir of the series. By this point, Suikoden was 4 titles deep into the main series, with several spin-off games having been released as well. Suikoden 4 is proof that Konami was starting to struggle with the series. Too many games too quickly led to a title that was just too threadbare. Battles in this game were reined in even further compared to Suikoden 3. Instead of the classic 6-member party from the first 2 games, or the 3 pairs from the 3rd game, Suiko 4 reduced the party down to 4 characters. On top of this, the game reintroduced a silent protagonist, and after having 3 very interesting and different lead characters in Suikoden 3, this was viewed as a major setback. While the story of the game was praised for being pretty decent, it was also criticized for being patchwork and very short. Whereas Suikoden 1 was a short game with a well-paced storyline, Suikoden 4 was short with a rush storyline that was also still somehow very slow to start. Fans and critics alike were unhappy with the changes to the series, and Konami seems to have understood this because Suikoden 5 is a brilliant return to form. Could this be the start of a new Suikoden renaissance? Well, Suikoden 5 was an excellent title. It also ended up being a death knell. The game revisited a lot of the gameplay designs of the first 2 games. 6-character battles where you control each character was particularly praised as a return to form. The rune system returned, recruiting 108 characters returned, and the game featured a great and immersive story. The only criticism I have for the title is that it's a little bit easy, but I'm okay with that. I played through the entirety of this game in 4 back-to-back 10-hour sessions, and I enjoyed every minute of it. The combat was fun again, the story was huge, the characters were cool, the music was great. Suikoden 5 was and is a great title. I might even place it just behind Suikoden 2 as the best game in the series. The game, like Suikoden 4, is a prequel to the series. You play as Prince Freodor Falena of the Falena Queendom. The plotline is as twisted and confusing as anything out of Game of Thrones, so I won't go into much detail because I will make myself look even more like an idiot than I normally do. The game was received mostly favorably by critics and the fan community. The game initially sold well, even though it technically sold less than the previous titles, including Suikoden 4. Reviewers were generally happy with the game, giving it mostly decent reviews. The return of the classic Suikoden flavor and the huge politically thick plotline were highlights. The game wasn't flawless, but it did mark a return to the old school roots of the series. Suikoden was set to return to its glory days as a popular, although somewhat niche, JRPG series. And then, it died. Suikoden 5 was the last mainline game in the series. It dropped globally in 2006 for the PS2, and that was pretty much the end. It wasn't an immediate ending, because Konami, being Konami, tried to pretend that it was still alive and relevant. This has been a recurring issue with latter-day Konami. Suikoden, Metal Gear, Contra, Castlevania are all dead, but the company will still occasionally drop a new game in one of these series, but the games are in name only. Metal Gear Survive, Contra Rogue Core, and Lords of Shadow are all hollow and cheap attempts to revive the old Konami magic. Suikoden Tear Christ was released for the DS in 2008-2009, and Suikoden Sumugureshi Hyakunin no Toki was released for the PSP in Japan in 2012. Now, neither of these games are particularly terrible, they're both okay games. And like I said, there are a number of side games released in the series. Suikoden Volume 1 was released for the PS1 in Japan in 2000, Volume 2 in 2001, Suikoden Card Stories was released for the GBA in 2001 in Japan, and Suikoden Tactics / Rhapsodia was released for the PS2 worldwide in 2005-2006. There are a huge number of spin-off games in the Suikoden series, but Tear Christ and Hyakunin no Toki were released during a period where Suikoden was thought to have been dead. If these were just spin-offs when the main series continues, they might be held in higher regard, but they are just reminders that the series was buried and forgotten by its creators. The PS3 came and went without Suikoden 6. The PS4 came and went without Suikoden 6. As of the time of this video being released, the PS5 is less than a year away, and there has been no word about Suikoden 6. I think it's safe to assume that this once praised and beloved game series is now dead and gone. Maybe not dead, but sleeping. But truth be told, do we actually want a new Suikoden game? There is a raw gnawing in the pits of my bowels named Suikoden Gacha that I just can't ignore. After all, there are many games with over 100 characters each in them. Suikoden Gacha ticks all of the boxes. I'm just over here trying to ignore this nagging feeling in my stomach called Suikoden Gacha. If you want to play the Suikoden games in the modern age, like I said, the games on the second-hand market will cost you an absolute assload of cash. But you can get Suikoden 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the PlayStation Store for the PS3, and they're very nicely priced as well. The first 3 games are definitely worth your time. Konami might not have given the series a rightful burial, but the community that supports these games really loves these games. The series might be dead, but it's not too late to fight against tyrannical empires with your army of 108 stars of destiny. And that is Suikoden. Thank you for watching, you guys. What are your thoughts on this huge RPG series? Do you have a favorite game? Did I leave anything out? Leave a comment below and let me know. Suikoden fans love talking about this series, and I would really love to get a conversation going. If you did like this video, please like it, share it with your cohorts, subscribe to the channel, smash that bell, and if you are able to support us financially, head over to patreon.com/digitalpoutine. Every dollar really does help us keep the channel alive. And that is all for now. Remember to hug your cats, tell your friends you love them, and never stop being nerdy.